Imagine waking up to your baby monitor crackling with a voice that isn't yours. Imagine your child whispering about a man only they can see. Imagine finding bruises on them with no explanation. Parenting is terrifying enough, but sometimes the real horror hides in the places we think are safest. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're diving into 3 disturbing parenting horror stories. Real experiences that will make you question what's really watching over your child. Let's begin. Story 1, The Man in the Corner by Emma Carlisle. The first time my daughter mentioned The Man in the Corner, I barely reacted. She was 3, always making up stories, always full of imagination. I assumed it was just another one of her imaginary friends, but there was something different this time. Something about the way she said it that made my stomach tighten. "Mommy, he watches me sleep," she whispered one night, clutching her stuffed bunny, her little hands trembling. She didn't seem scared, just matter of fact, like she was telling me what she had for lunch. I glanced toward the corner of her room, the darkest part where the nightlight barely reached. Nothing was there. I smiled and tucked her in. "There's no one there, sweetheart. It's just shadows," I assured her, smoothing her hair. She didn't argue, just turned her head to the side, eyes fixed on that same corner. At first I brushed it off, but over the next few weeks things got worse. She started waking up crying, screaming for me in the middle of the night. When I'd rush into her room, she'd be curled up in the opposite corner of the bed, as far away from his corner as possible. Her tiny body would shake, her face streaked with tears. One night I decided to stay with her, to show her that there was nothing to be afraid of. I lay beside her, stroking her hair until she fell asleep. At around 2 a.m., I woke up to an eerie silence. My daughter was no longer beside me. My breath caught in my throat as I turned and saw her. She was standing in the middle of the room, facing the corner. I sat up quickly. "Lily," I whispered. She didn't move. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it toward the corner. Nothing, just her dresser and a few scattered toys. I exhaled, relieved, and reached for her hand. "Come back to bed, sweetie." She turned to me slowly, her face blank. "He doesn't like the light." A cold shiver ran down my spine. I didn't know what to say, so I just led her back to bed. But sleep didn't come easy after that. Then the bruises started. At first they were small, faint marks on her arms and legs, easy to dismiss as the normal bumps and scrapes of a toddler. But soon they became darker, deeper. I panicked, thinking she was hurting herself in her sleep. "Lily, how did you get these?" I asked one morning, trying to keep my voice calm. She lowered her eyes. "I didn't do it." I knelt beside her. "Then who did?" She hesitated before whispering, "Him." That was the moment I stopped ignoring it. That night I set up a baby monitor in her room, determined to catch whatever was happening. I stayed up watching the feed on my phone, fighting sleep. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Until 3:12 a.m. The screen flickered. Static crackled through the monitor. My eyes snapped open just in time to see Lily move. She wasn't in bed anymore. She was standing in the corner, her face pressed against the wall. My hands shook as I bolted from my bed and ran to her room. My heart pounded as I reached for her. "Lily?" I shook her gently, but she didn't turn. I grabbed her shoulders and pulled her toward me. Her skin was ice cold. Finally, she blinked and looked up at me. "I had to stand with him," she murmured, her voice distant, almost not hers. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, when she was at preschool, I checked the wall where she had been standing. My hands trembled as I ran my fingers over it. Scratched into the paint, barely visible but undeniably there, were 3 words. "Leave her alone." We moved out 2 weeks later. Lily doesn't remember any of it, but I do. Story 2, The Voice in the Baby Monitor by Daniel Whitmore. When my wife and I had our first baby, we were overly cautious. Every little noise, every slight movement, one of us would be up checking on him. Like most first-time parents, we relied on a baby monitor to give us some peace of mind. But that monitor quickly became the source of our worst nightmares. It started with static. At first I didn't think much of it. It was just faint crackling, the usual interference you get with these devices. But one night around 2 a.m., The static got louder, sharp enough to wake me. I rolled over, groggy, and reached for the monitor, adjusting the volume. That's when I heard it. A voice, software whispering. "He's awake." I shot up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. My wife stirred beside me, her face pale in the dim glow of the screen. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, swallowing hard. We both turned our attention to the monitor. Oliver, our 6-month-old, was in his crib, perfectly still. He wasn't awake. He wasn't even stirring. A cold chill crept up my spine. Maybe it was picking up a neighbor's frequency. Maybe we were just imagining things. But then, barely above the static, came another whisper. "He's waiting." I didn't hesitate. I threw off the blankets and bolted upstairs. My hands shook as I pushed open the nursery door. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the baby monitor sitting on the dresser. Oliver was lying on his back, sleeping peacefully. I checked the closet under the crib, behind the rocking chair. Nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next night I stayed up, determined to catch whatever was happening. I propped myself up in bed, eyes locked on the monitor screen, watching my son sleep. Hours passed, nothing unusual. I started to think I had imagined it. Then at exactly 2:46 a.m., the static returned. Louder this time, harsher, and then the whisper. "He's mine." I froze. On the screen, Oliver moved. He rolled onto his side, facing the camera. Then, he smiled. A deep, unnatural smile that stretched across his tiny face. But his eyes weren't open. A paralyzing fear gripped me as I watched. His tiny fingers twitched. His lips moved, though no sound came out. I didn't think. I ran. I reached his crib and scooped him up, pressing him against my chest. He was cold, too cold. I shook him gently. "Oliver?" His eyelids fluttered open, his smile fading into a sleepy yawn. His body warmed against mine, like whatever had touched him had finally let go. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I told my wife everything. She looked just as disturbed as I felt. That day, I made a decision. I needed proof. I set up my laptop to record the baby monitor feed, determined to catch whatever was happening. I replayed the footage the next morning, scanning through hours of static and silence. But then at 2:46 a.m., I saw it. The static surged. The crib trembled slightly as if a breeze had passed through, though the windows were closed. And then, just before the screen flickered out, a figure, tall, shadowed, standing beside Oliver's crib. Its face was featureless. Its body wavered, like it wasn't entirely there. I slammed the laptop shut, bile rising in my throat. That was it. I wasn't waiting to see what would happen next. We packed our bags that day. By nightfall, we were gone. I don't know what it was. I don't want to know. All I know is that it wanted my son, and I wasn't about to let it take him. Story 3, The Basement Door by Caroline Thatcher. When we bought our house, I knew it needed work. The price was too good to be true, but we were desperate for space. My husband and I had just had our second child, and our small apartment wasn't cutting it anymore. The house was old, creaky, but charming. There was only one thing I didn't like: the basement. Something about it made my skin crawl. The air was thick, damp, and freezing, even in the middle of summer. The wooden stairs groaned under every step, and the single light bulb flickered like it could go out at any moment. But what unsettled me most was the door at the far end of the basement. It was old, even older than the rest of the house. Thick wood, rusted hinges, and a heavy iron lock that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The first time I went down there, I asked my husband about it. "What's behind that door?" He shrugged. "Probably just some storage. We can check it out later." But I didn't want to. Every time I stepped into that basement, I felt watched, like something was standing just beyond that door, waiting. Then my daughter started talking about the boy. At first, I thought she meant a kid from school. She was 4, and her imagination ran wild. But one night, as I was tucking her into bed, she looked at me with wide, serious eyes. "He doesn't like it when you go in the basement, Mommy." My heart skipped a beat. "Who?" "The boy," she whispered. "He says you shouldn't open the door." Chills ran down my spine. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Sweetie, there's no boy in the basement." She frowned. "Yes, there is. He lives there." I forced a smile and kissed her forehead, but I barely slept that night. The next evening, I was home alone with the kids. My husband was working late, and I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when I heard it. A creaking noise. It came from the basement. I froze, dish in hand. The sound came again, this time louder. Footsteps. I grabbed the baby monitor and turned on the screen. My son was asleep in his crib. My daughter was tucked in bed. I wasn't imagining it. Heart pounding, I walked toward the basement door, gripping the handle with sweaty fingers. I didn't want to go down there, but I had to check. I slowly pushed the door open and peered into the darkness. Nothing. The basement was silent. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and damp wood. I turned to go back upstairs, and then I heard it. A whisper, muffled, low, coming from behind the locked door. I couldn't move. My body felt frozen. My breath caught in my throat. The whisper came again, this time clearer. "Don't open it." I ran. I didn't stop until I was upstairs. Every light in the house turned on. The basement door locked behind me. I barely slept that night, jumping at every noise, convinced I'd hear footsteps again. The next day, I told my husband everything. He laughed at first, but when he saw how pale I was, he agreed to check the basement. I stood at the top of the stairs as he made his way down. He ran his hands over the old door, jiggled the lock. Then he frowned. "There are scratch marks on this." I felt sick. "What?" He pointed. Long, deep gouges lined the wood, like someone had clawed at it, trying to get out. That was it. I didn't care what was behind that door. I just wanted out. We sold the house 6 months later. I never looked back. But sometimes I dream about that door, and in my dreams, it's open. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more creepy stories. Which of these stories gave you a chilling experience? Let us know. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are real.